This is the first video of Introduction to HTML and CSS. Basically what I'll do here is I'll walk through sort of from the ground up how to build websites in HTML and CSS. And this will be just to kind of define audience real quickly. This is for absolute beginners. So if you already kind of know what HTML and CSS is, you can skip this video. But this is for people that have never coded before, that have never created websites before. And so that's the general audience that this is geared toward. So kind of what we'll cover in this video, four things. One, we'll define what is HTML. We'll in particular differentiate that from what is CSS. We'll look at three sample websites. We'll look and use Mozilla's Web Developer, which is a really nice tool that allows you to do some cool things with HTML and CSS. We'll look at that. I'll ask you to sort of follow along and download Mozilla Web Developer as well. We'll thirdly review the tools you'll need for web design. So what tools do you actually need to start your first website? And then fourthly, we'll create our first valid HTML document. So this should be a fairly short video, and we'll just kind of walk through these four things. So first of all, what is HTML? Firstly, it stands literally for Hypertext Markup Language. So it's an acronym for Hypertext Markup Language. And HTML are types of files that can be read by web browsers. So the easiest way I sort of explain what HTML files are is I sort of liken them to Word files, Microsoft Word files, because we all have a framework for what is a Word file. And so a Microsoft Word file is a file that contains content, and it has a file extension, usually .docx, right? So Microsoft Word files are files that can be opened in the Microsoft Word software. Hypertext Markup Language files, HTML files, are also files. They have a different file extension, .html, and they can be opened or read in web browsers. So things like Mozilla Firefox, or Google Chrome, or Internet Explorer, right? And so that's a really sort of easy way to understand what an HTML file is. It's just a file that contains content. It can't be read or viewed in something like Microsoft Word, but it can be read or viewed in something like a web browser like Google Chrome. So that's sort of the first characteristic of HTML. The second is it's a way to describe content. So the easiest sort of definition of what is it, it's a way to describe content. So anything that you would have on a typical website, usually words, right? So paragraphs of text, headings, pictures or images, videos, all of that content can be described or marked up in HTML. And then secondly, it's a system of tags that describes this content. And we'll talk about and define what a tag is here in a second. Thirdly, it's structural and not visual. So HTML is a markup language that describes the structure of a document, right? So if you have a bunch of paragraph text, you can use a tag called the paragraph tag, and you can mark up that paragraph tag. You're not changing the way that paragraph text looks. You're not changing the font size or even choosing the different kinds of fonts. HTML is simply a structural language. And then fourthly, it's finite and predefined, meaning you can't make up your own tags, right? There's a finite set of tags. There's a library of tags that already exists that you'll use to describe the content on a website. Okay, so those are four main characteristics of a website. What you'll need to create a website and what you'll need for sort of this set of video tutorials is really just two things. Well, three. You'll need a computer, but with, that being said, you'll need a text editor. So there are all kinds of free text editors out there. I would recommend, if you're on a Windows machine, Notepad++ or Sublime Text. And if you're on a Mac, like I am, I would recommend Sublime Text. So you can just Google Sublime Text and download it. It's a free text editor. And a text editor is basically a piece of software that just is a blank notepad. It's just a blank document. So you'll need a text editor, and then secondly, you'll need a web browser. And that is whatever browser that you're comfortable using. I would recommend testing your website on multiple browsers once you actually get into some of the more design-heavy aspects of web design. But I would recommend Google Chrome. I think that's a good browser that will render your web pages well. Okay, let's talk about 4 elements of every HTML document. Actually, before we do that, let's take a look at some examples of a few websites that I have pulled up here in Mozilla Firefox. So the first thing I'd like you to do is, I'd love for you to download Mozilla Web Developer. So if you just Google Mozilla Web Developer, it'll be the 3rd link, and it may be the 1st or 2nd depending on the day, but it's an add-on for Firefox. And then you'll just click Add to Firefox. So if you need to pause the video or anything, I would recommend you doing that. That basically will add this toolbar here to your Mozilla Firefox web browser. So what I have here is I've got 3 websites. I have UNT's website, which is a university. I've got Etsy, which is a e-commerce site. And I've got WordPress.com, which is just sort of an informational site. And so what I wanted to show you is all websites sort of have similar elements, right? They've got headers, they've got navigation bars, and they've got some content. So what I wanted to show you is what you can do, and you can kind of follow along with me, is you can disable all styles, CSS, and you can view just the raw HTML file. And so what I wanted to show you and really kind of point out is HTML is structural and not visual. So this is an example of a website with no CSS. So CSS is a separate language in a separate file that we'll talk about in a different video that we won't talk about in this video that controls the visual design of a website. And so all sort of websites are run on HTML. Every single website on the internet is marked up in HTML in some way, shape, or form, and they all pretty much look the same, right? So if you turn off the visual elements, they all pretty much look the same. It's just kind of text and images, and it looks kind of like an outline. So we can do the same thing if we do it for Etsy, if we disable all styles. So we take out the CSS file, and all we're seeing is the same kinds of things, right? It looks kind of like an outline. We'll do the same thing for WordPress. It looks kind of like an outline. And it's basically text and images. And so the reason why I like to show people this is kind of what your HTML files will look like at the beginning. They're just going to look, it's not going to look pretty, it's not going to look kind of how you want them to look, but you sort of have to understand the fundamentals of HTML before you can jump into really making your website look like this. You have to first master making it structurally look like this. Okay, so I kind of wanted to show that to you just as an illustration of HTML is the structure, CSS is the visual design. Very important concepts to separate out. So back to this, let's really quickly talk about 4 elements of every HTML document, and then we'll talk about 4 rules of HTML, and then we'll start our HTML file. So 4 elements of every HTML document. If you've got these 4 elements, you've got a web page. You've got a valid web page. The first is the doc type declaration, and I'll walk you through how to do that and what that is. But I just want to define these things really quickly. This tells the web browser what kind of file you're working with and what version of HTML you're working with. So there's multiple versions of HTML, and the web browser won't know. You can open a file in the web browser. It won't know what it's dealing with unless you tell it what it's dealing with. So that's the purpose of the doc type declaration. Secondly is the head tag. The head tag occurs at the very top of the page, and it includes metadata, so data about the website itself. Everything that is included in the head tag doesn't actually appear on the web page, and I'll explain and show you that. The third thing, or third element, is the title tag. This is a tag that's embedded inside of the head tag. This is a tag that describes the page. I'll show you an example of a title tag. And then fourth is the body tag. Inside of the body tag is everything that actually appears on the website itself. So those are the 4 elements of every HTML document. You can come back to this slide for future reference if you need to. And then 4 quick rules. Rules of HTML. First, tags are created using angled brackets. So these are the less than symbol and the greater than symbol. So what you see here is examples of 3 tags. There's the paragraph tag, which is just the P inside of these brackets. The image tag, which is just the word image inside of these brackets. And the video tag, which is the word video. So the first rule is you gotta tag your content. The second rule is all tags that open must close, right? So here's an example of opening a paragraph tag. So it's just the less than symbol, your P, and the greater than symbol. And then you just write your paragraph text, so whatever you're writing. And then to close a tag, it's the less than symbol, the /, the tag name, and then the greater than symbol. Okay, so all tags that open must close. That's the second rule. The third rule is tags close in the reverse order that they open. So if you have embedded tags, which you likely will have in your website, head opens first, so it closes last. Title opens second, so it closes first. And so you can kind of see when you've got tags embedded inside of other tags, they close in the reverse order they open. And then thirdly, some tags have optional and required attributes. We'll talk about attributes in a later video. So those are the rules of HTML. What I want to do now is I want us to just create our own HTML, our very own first HTML document. So what I've got here is I've got Sublime Text open. I'm working on a Mac. Again, you can open this in Notepad++ if you're on a Windows machine. But I would recommend Sublime Text. I think it's a great text editor. And all you're seeing is just a blank page, just a blank document. So what we'll do now is we'll first put the 4 elements of every HTML document that you need. Okay, so the first is what's called the doc type declaration. And so to do that, to declare the doc type, we create an opening tag, an exclamation point, and this is really the only time you'll use the exclamation point, and then you'll type the word doc type. And then now we're going to declare, or we're going to tell the browser what kind of HTML document is this. We're going to use what's called HTML5, and so there's no special tag, it's just the word, it's just the letters HTML. Okay, so we've declared HTML and we've also opened HTML. So what I want to do now is I want to close HTML at the very bottom. Okay, so everything inside of these 2 brackets constitutes our HTML document. Okay, so our first required element is our doc type. And again, that's just telling the browser what kind of document we're working with. Okay, the second required element is what's called the head tag. And I'll just kind of show you how I code. When the indentations don't actually matter. The browser doesn't read the indentations. This is just good best practice for you as you start to create websites. So when I open a tag, I always close it right away, even if I don't put any content inside of it. So because the third rule is every tag that opens must close. To just remind myself, I need to open a tag and close a tag. So that's our second required element. Our third required element is the title tag. So again, I'm indenting it because it's embedded inside of the head tag. And then the fourth required element is our body tag. And I'm going to always close the body right before the HTML closes. Okay? So before we make any changes, I'm going to save this right onto my desktop, and I'm just going to call it You can call it anything you want. I'm going to call it sample.html, or actually I'll call it first.html since this is our first website. And you have to make sure you put .html at the end of it, otherwise it won't recognize it as an HTML file. Okay, so first.html, I'm saving that on my desktop. You can save that wherever you want. And what you'll see is once you save in Sublime Text, it turns these things into colors, and it sort of color codes the different HTML tags, but that doesn't really matter much to us. So what I can do now is I can, as a matter of illustration, I can open, if you double click the file that you saved to your desktop, you can open it in your web browser, and you can see there's nothing on the page because we've not done anything. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create a title. So I'm going to put a title on this web page. I'm going to call it My First Website with an exclamation point. You can call it whatever you want. We'll refresh, and you'll notice nothing again is actually showing up on the web page, but you will notice what does change is the tab in your web browser changes. My First Website. And so that's where the title tag shows up, is the tab right here in your web browser. And that's really important because this is one of the main tags that Google will index and look for as they create their search engine hits. So if you don't call this, if you just called this home, that's not that helpful for Google. But if you called this, Chris Lamb's homepage, that's a little more helpful for Google, right? So thinking about and considering the title of your pages is going to be important for search engine optimization. I'm just going to call this My First Website because that's what it is, and we're not really going to actually have this indexed by Google. So what you see here is everything inside the head tag doesn't actually show up on the page. There's nothing showing up on the page still. Okay. Again, as I explained earlier, everything that shows up on the page is contained inside the body tag. So the first thing I want to do is I want to put some content in our body tag. And so one of the main things that I want to teach you and that you should know is it's not that important to memorize every tag. You're going to learn them eventually. But if you just Google HTML tags and you go to the first link here, this is a link of every HTML tag in alphabetical order. And so it's helpful because it's just a nice reference and you don't need to memorize every single tag. So if we open this and I say I want a header, I'm sorry, a heading, not a header. If I want a heading, we can look and we can see H1 to H6. These are examples of heading tags. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my HTML document. I'm going to open my heading tag. I'm going to create a header, a heading, and I'm going to call this Chris's First Website. And the main rule that we got to remember is every tag that opens, which is our heading 1 tag, must close. So I'm going to close it. And so again, to close it, we have this / and then we add the tag content. So we can go back to our page and we can see Chris's First Website shows up on the top of the page. And usually a lot of websites have text and paragraphs, so we'll add a paragraph text. Here is some sample paragraph text. My name is Chris, and this is my first website. Okay, and again, every tag that opens must close. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll refresh, and we can see here is some paragraph tags. My name is Chris. This is my first website. Then we'll add one more element. That's an embedded element. So I want to add a bulleted list we'll say, here's some things I'm good at. And then I want to add a list of things I'm good at. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a bulleted list, which is the UL tag, which stands for unordered list. The OL tag stands for ordered list. That's the numbered list. And I'm going to close the UL tag right here. So every tag that opens must close. And inside of the UL tag, I'm going to create bullet points. So to create a bullet point, this is what's called the LI tag, or list item tag. And I'm going to say, here's some things I'm good at. I'm good at web design. And every tag that opens must close. I'm good at teaching. Every tag that opens must close. And I'm good at YouTube. Every tag that opens must close. Okay, so this is a list, a bulleted list with 3 list items. Okay, and so if we refresh, we'll see, hi, my name is Chris. Here's some things I'm good at, and then the 3 list items here. The last thing I'll show you is you can actually change this to OLs, the ordered list, and those change automatically to numbers, 1, 2, 3. So you'll notice it's just kind of an outline. It looks similar to the sites we looked at when we turned off the CSS files earlier. It looks just like that. And so that's pretty much that's pretty much the basics of what is HTML and how to create your first HTML document. Make sure you save this somewhere, because we'll build on this document in the next video. But I hope this was helpful, and we'll start to build out this as we continue.